In the research group at Nomura, we've been running with a fairly upbeat view toward the world economy. We felt that growth would be strong, it would be stable, it would be synchronized and above trend, and that in time that would lead to higher levels of global inflation. The Fed has been ahead of the process of monetary policy normalization relative to the ECB and the Bank of Japan. But given that synchronized burst of strength that we've been seeing in the world economy, the focus is now very firmly and very squarely on those two central banks as we move forward.
Well, it's a very interesting time for the ECB. They have for many years been easing. They took policy rates negative in 2014, and then they launched an extraordinary easing program, a QE program in 2015. And what we're seeing now is that they're slowly moving away from these extraordinary measures. Why they're doing this growth is extremely good in the euro area. I mean, they've characterized it as an expansion as opposed to a recovery, and we're at 20-year highs. But in terms of the tantrum, I don't think that's something that we'll have in the euro area. Simply because the ECB have done so much. They've learnt from that experience from the Fed, and they've done so much to mute that effect. So in terms of signals, if they signal that there'll be a sudden stop to QE in September, the markets will have to pull forward the timing of the first hike. At the moment, the markets are expecting a taper to zero. Right. Other signals would be if they suggest that they're behind the curve in some sense. They don't want to let the economy run hot, as it were. Then this could suggest that they hike more sooner rather than more later. Do you think the Bank of Japan will change the 10-year target?
Yes, I actually would expect that December will be the timing for the BOJ to raise the 10-year target. For one, yes, that the BOJ wants to ride on this global normalization trend of the central banking community.
If the Bank of Japan changed this target, do you think it will change very aggressively this hunt for yield dynamic?
I think it would, in short. But having said that, we have to stress that the BOJ is not even in the normalization process yet. This is only the part of the so-called yield curve adjustment to the higher inflation expectations. And BOJ will make sure they are still intentionally behind the curve to raising rates here. So I think the next step will be only the 25 basis hike on the 10-year side, while keeping the policy rate still remain at the -10. And they will also make sure this is not the start of the series of the hikes, rather than it's just one-time shot.
So what do you think the key risks are to the BOJ around this scenario that we've outlined?
I think still it's the dollar-yen rates. When the BOJ has tried to send the first message in just January by cutting the super long operations, the market reaction was very disappointing to the BOJ. The yen has spiked and the stock market has sold off quite aggressively. Because some of the hedge fund community, I think, they jumped on this the change in the policy target theme too quickly by selling the JGB futures too aggressively. So if the currency market will react to this BOJ's communications too aggressively, I think that's going to basically slow down, if not jeopardize the process.
Okay, so a very important communication effort is required from the BOJ, which is something that's very similar for the ECB.
I think what we can learn from this is the high level of interdependency that exists between the monetary policy of the European Central Bank and the Bank of Japan, and of course, as well, if we add in the Federal Reserve. It's been very important over the last several years. The stock of assets that exists on central banks' balance sheets has acted as a key determinant for global financial conditions. So if the Bank of Japan, and to a lesser extent the European Central Bank, are going to continue to move fairly slowly, that in turn implies that that stock would remain quite high and that global financial conditions would remain relatively accommodative.